Thank you, guys. It was wonderful. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Amanda Neppl, and I serve primarily out at the West Des Moines campus, lead the adult discipleship team out there. It has been a little while since I've been here to Grimes to preach. I had a while ago, and the reason I haven't been here recently is just simply because Pastor Andy hasn't invited me. And I don't know where he is right now, but he's guilty. Anyway, however, I have been here for some women's events and have really enjoyed being able to be out here for those events that I have been a part of. And I'm excited for this Friday night to be a part of the women's wellness event that you all are doing. We had a similar event in West Des Moines this last summer, and a couple of Grimes women were there for that and enjoyed it and appreciated it and wanted to be able to bring that to all of you. So that's what we're going to do on this Friday. So I'm really excited to join you as we talk about wellness, mind, body, and spirit. Now, however, today, that is not what we're talking about. Today, we are continuing on with these first-order questions, of life. And we've been doing this in our sermon series for a couple weeks. We're going to continue doing this in the sermon series throughout the year, taking a look at questions that you all have asked. And we wanted to take a year and answer some of these really big first-level questions. So the question we have today, honestly, it's really not that big of a deal. It's kind of a throwaway. I don't even know why we're asking it. The question we're asking this week is, what is the meaning of life? No big deal. Just trying to figure out who I am, what am I doing here, those types of things. So we're looking this week at what is the meaning of life. As I was preparing for the message this weekend, I did something that I don't normally do, and for some reason I thought I don't know what I thought I was going to get out of this, but I decided to go to the internet, and I decided to ask the internet, what is the meaning of life? Okay, friends, you don't ever need to do that, okay? I have done that for you. You are welcome. You do not need to go down all these rabbit holes that the internet will provide for you. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 19 says that the wisdom of humans is foolishness to God, proven every single day on the web. And so all sorts of different things. I realize I'm never getting that time back. It was just my offering for this service today. Here's the thing. If we want to understand what the meaning of life is, there is really only one way to be able to figure out what any one of us are doing here. And the only way we're going to be able to answer that question is to go to the source, to go to the origin story. And so we're going to do that here in just a second. We started doing this 2 weeks ago with our very first question that we had here as part of this series. The very first question was, how did we get here? And we took a look at the book of Genesis, and Andy, I'm assuming you guys did the same thing, right? How do we get? Okay, good, so otherwise this is going to be embarrassing. But you guys also answered the question of how do we get here? And by doing that, taking a good, honest look at Genesis and what Genesis has to say about how we got here. And no matter the specifics of that, what we learned from that was that God did it, that God spoke, that God moved, that God had something that was on God's heart. And so God said, let's do this, and it was done. And that when God had created everything that he had created, he looked at the human beings that he had created, and he had said, they are very good. Regardless of what the specifics of that looked like, the humans that he had created were very good. And so then the week after that, it was a special weekend in the church calendar. It was Baptism of Our Lord Sunday. And so Hope has had this tradition now for several years where on that particular Sunday, we offer open baptisms. And anyone who wants to come up and receive the grace of Jesus through the waters of baptism is invited to come up and do that. And so you all did that here in Grimes as well. We did it at West Des Moines. Across the Hope Network, there was like over 600 people who were baptized, like bananas. You guys, the number of people who came forward to receive God's grace in the waters of baptism. So for these first 2 weeks, as we've been looking at these first order questions, we've started with how did we get here? And we've learned that we got here through a God who created us out of the love that God has, that God is always moving things forward. And not only does God love the world that he created and thinks that the people that he created are very good, not only that, but God poured his grace out on the people that he created. That his intention was always that there would be no separation between him and the people that he created. And so in light of that, in light of the fact that that's true, that we were created on purpose for a purpose by a creator who loves us, who lavishes with his grace, in light of that, What are we doing here? What is our purpose? What is our meaning? And so if we flip the page in Genesis, past Genesis 1, and we go to Genesis 2, then we see this, that the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground. This is the important part. He breathed the breath of life into the man's nostrils, and the man became a living person. Here's what I need you to get from this. I don't need you to worry about the specifics of what this looked like. What I need you to understand is that human beings, all of us, every single human being has received a human-sized portion of God's Spirit. Pay attention to that because it's really important. This is going to explain a lot of things in your life and why a lot of the things that you long for and hope and dream are the way that they are. Because every single one of us has received a human-sized portion of God's Spirit. Well, what do we know about God? God creates. God moves forward. God loves. God gathers. God serves. God pours out his grace for us. Those are the things that God does, and so those are the things that are within every single one of us as well. You have within you desires and longings and dreams. There are ways that you long to matter to the world, a legacy that you long to leave, whether to your family, whether it's in some bigger context. You have that within you, and I want you to know it is given to you by God. It is good. Those drives, those longings, they are good. Human beings have empathy. It's one of the things that separates humans from non-humans, right? You can have a dog, and a dog or your pet can understand that there's when you're suffering, it can know that, but only a human being can suffer alongside. We do that because we have a human portion of God's Spirit within us. And so often, it's important for us to note this because the drives and the ambitions and the longings and the things that are within us that long to leave a mark, that long to leave a legacy, oftentimes we think that those things are sinful, they're prideful, they're about us. We've kind of been trained to think that. And look, we live in a fallen world. We're going to talk about that here in a second. And so there's always a bit of pride, a bit of, look at me, tinged with everything that we do. But at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, you were given that longing by God to do the things that God has created you uniquely to do, the gifts that he has given you to serve. Now, the reality is, as I said, that sin is real and sin is in the world. And so we can read in John chapter 10 where Jesus said, it is the thief's purpose to steal and kill and destroy. So what that means is this longing that God has given you to make a mark, to leave a legacy, to matter, to create something, to drive something, to build something. What that means is that the thief, sin, has gotten a hold of it and has twisted it and has made it so that we can't recognize that this God Spirit within us actually calls out for God. How like calls out for like, sin twists that and does make it a little bit more about us and a little bit more about what we want to do. It twists it so that we're not able to recognize that it is God who gave us that longing in the first place, that it is God who gave us the gifts that God wants us to use, not for our own prideful purpose, but for the good of the world around us. And so we end up in this place where we don't necessarily recognize that God has given us this, that we're only going to be able then to find our meaning with God, that nothing is ever going to be able to satisfy us the way God can satisfy us, because when like meets like, it recognizes one another. Sin has changed that for us. And so instead of being able to ask the question, God, what is the purpose that you want to accomplish through the life that you have given me, through the resources and the gifts that you have given me? How is it, God, that you want to continue to create and move through the world? How do you want to do that to me? We get it twisted. The question that we end up asking instead is just simply, what is my purpose? We forget that it's God's purpose through us, and we just look internally to ourselves. What is my purpose? What is the meaning for my life? What are the things that I want to do with this time that I have here? And don't get me wrong, that's not necessarily a misguided question. It's just that it starts from the wrong place. When it starts from us, it's actually never going to be able to provide the meaning, the satisfaction, the peace that starting with God is going to be able to give us, because what we have within us starts with God. God started that in us. The reality of the situation is that because this has gotten a little bit twisted, because it's a little bit messed up, we end up thinking that what we achieve, what we do, is a much more relevant question than who we are in our core. what we accomplish, how we spend our days. If you're working, we're much more concerned about what our working job is, what our career is, our volunteerism, our hobbies, all those different types of things. If you are past the normal, if you have retired, that's what I'm trying to say. If you have retired, one of the things that I know that is difficult for people when they enter into retirement is figuring out, okay, now what? Like, I've had somebody tell me what to do. I've had somebody kind of give me meaning. Even if my boss was kind of a jerk, at least I understood the goal. Get through it sometimes, right? I also know that we get this wrong because I have kids who are young adults. And so my oldest is in a choir teacher, has graduated from college, works at Sioux City North High School, is off the payroll. We're getting there, right? One at a time. So Cam's in her first job. My second daughter, I have 4 kids. 3 of them are graduating this year. So my second daughter is at the University of Iowa. She'll be graduating in May. My third daughter just graduated from DMAC this December. Just moved out last weekend, you guys. But don't get too excited because the one who graduates in May is coming right back home. Okay? So, there it is. And then my son, I still also have my son. He lives with us because he's in high school. But he also graduates in May from high school as well. And so with all of these kids and their stories and their experiences and the fact that they're all graduating, the only question any adult knows how to ask them, what's next? What are you going to do? And I get it. I do get it because a very definable door is being shut, right? Like a season is coming to a close. And I totally get that. When God closes the door, he opens a window, right? Or whatever the expression is. But a season is coming to an end for these kids who are graduating. So I understand where the question comes from. But I just think what it really reveals is how we walk through this space and we don't even realize that we are walking in this space that is just tainted by sin. We don't even realize that we are putting that expectation of what are you going to do? What are you going to accomplish? We don't even realize that that's what we're doing. Here's what I suggest instead. If you find out you're talking to someone, they are getting ready to graduate, how about this? Congratulations, that is really exciting. What's the one thing you're looking forward to after graduation? Because maybe what they want to do is sleep. And you know what? Let's let them. Before the world destroys them, let's let them get some rest, okay? Right? I'm just kidding, kind of, but adulting is not all it's cracked up to be, is it? We don't even necessarily realize that we walk through in just the atmosphere of this sin. And when I talk about sin, I'm not talking about the things that we do necessarily. They're the sinful things that we do in thought, word, and deed. I'm talking about the reality that sin is just all around us, that we live in a world that is fallen. We're waiting. Jesus has defeated sin and death, yes, and we are waiting for Jesus to come back and set it right. And because we live in this world that is fallen, we don't just know to go to God. Our default actually is to go away from God because of the world, the sinful world that we live in, that we don't even recognize that that's what it is. Kind of like how you can go nose blind to things. You know, you don't know what your house smells like. If you want to know what it smells like, invite somebody who doesn't live there to come over. They'll tell you. We go nose blind, I think. We get sin blind to the reality of sin in the world as well. We don't realize that it's just the milieu, the atmosphere that we're walking in that causes us to come to this place where we really maybe intellectually know that what we do is not more important than who we are, but that's just what comes out of us. I got a cold over Christmas, and I'm still working that out, so it's great. Enjoy winter. Speaking of living in a fallen world, right? We know that what we do is not nearly as important as who we are, by a lot of different reasons, but we can also see it in the question that the Pharisees came to Jesus to ask him. The Pharisees were trying to trap him, yes, but they came to him and they said, Teacher, what is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? What they were trying to get at, they were trying to see what he would say. They were trying to trap him into saying something against God. It's really interesting, though, because remember how we said the wisdom of humans is foolishness to God? Joke's on the Pharisees, am I right? So they come to him and they say, what is the most important commandment? And Jesus answers them not with a do. He answers them with a relationship. Isn't that interesting? He could have told them something to do. He gave them a relationship. He told them about love. Now, they came to him, they said, what is the greatest commandment? Let's understand what a commandment is. The commandments are the things that God gave to Moses to give to his people after they had left slavery in Egypt. And so God is saying to Moses, if you guys can handle these 10 things, keep a good relationship with me, don't have any idols, don't take my name in vain, remember who I am, and then be kind to one another, essentially. If you guys can remember how to do all that, then life is going to go relatively well for you. So not only are these commandments, they are the rules that God has given us, but if you want to think about it, really what the commandments are, is they're the user manual for this human machine that we have. If you want to have this human machine, that is you, function at its best, the user manual would say, number 1, love God. Number 2, love the people around you. That's how to have that rich and satisfying life that Jesus came to give us. When Jesus was asked what is the most important commandment, he did not answer with something to do. He answered with a way to feel and a way to approach the world. Not a way of thinking you have to earn anything, but a way of realizing that it comes down to love, loving God, loving others. Now, of course, when we have God's love in our heart, when we have love for others that overflows from God's love for us and overflows, like the song that we sang, into the world around us, of course, that is going to lead to action. It has to. Of course it does. I'm not saying that it doesn't. But Jesus is saying it doesn't start with the action. It has never been enough to start with the action. What matters more than the action is what's going on right in here and the motivation for the thing that you are doing. That's why it doesn't necessarily matter how you spend your time, whether you spend it in a career, whether you spend it volunteering, raising children, practicing hobbies, taking naps, whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily matter how you spend your time. What matters is the motivation behind why you are doing it. And this is why Jesus was often so hard on the Pharisees, because the Pharisees had careers that were religious careers that you think might have kept them doing the things that their religion, their faith in God taught them to do, but they didn't have a single drop of love in their heart. So instead, Jesus found fishermen and tax collectors and all sorts of people who were on the outside, all sorts of people who had the reputation of being sinners, and he took them and he taught them how to love God and love others. How you are engaging your time is so much less important than the motivation and the spirit behind how you are engaging it. If it comes from first loving God, allowing God to love you, and then overflowing that out into the world around you. Now, obviously, I hope this goes without saying, but just for the sake of clarity, if the things that you are engaged in require you to cheat or steal or lie of any of those types of things matter. If you are doing those things, stop that, okay? But for most of us, it may be a big thing that you're called to do, but probably it's a small thing. Probably it's loving the people that God has already put right in front of you, starting with that really well, and then having it branch out further from that. It doesn't matter what you do, it matters the heart in which you do it. This is why the Apostle Paul said, work willingly at whatever you do as though you are working for the Lord. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance, and remember that the master that you are serving is Christ. Whatever you do, do it as though you're working for the Lord. I don't know why some people have a big call on their life to move into this. They know that God has told them to do this thing or to do that thing. I don't know why that happens to some people and not to others. People will come into this, talk to me and have this question all the time. I'm sure it happens to Pastor Andy and others as well. They'll be like, I'm trying to figure out this situation. Should I be in this place or that place? Should I do this job or should I do that job? And they'll sometimes even be so bold as to be like, Pastor Amanda, what should I do? And I'm like, what I think is absolutely irrelevant. It's not relevant what I think you should do. The only relevant question is, how are you able to love God and love people in that place, wherever you are, whatever you are doing? Some people have a big call to go and do a big specific thing. Wonderful. Then that is their obligation to do that thing. For most of us, it's just going to be love God and love the people who are put in front of you from right where you are. For most of us, it's not the big thing. For most of us, there might be some of you sitting here in this room, and the nudge that you're receiving, the thing that you are supposed to do is, maybe you're supposed to go ahead and make that phone call. Maybe you're supposed to go ahead and extend that apology. Maybe you're supposed to receive that apology. Maybe the act of big love that you are being called to right now is to let go of somebody in your life whose decisions you are coming to the conclusion you cannot control. They're their decisions. Maybe the big act of love that you need to do is to just give that person over to God, continue praying for them, but decide that you're not going to fight this battle that isn't yours anymore, because that's actually not loving them. What we are called to do are the small things that we do with love in our heart, as though we were working for the Lord and not working for people. And it doesn't matter what your career is, because you can be a pastor and get this wrong, and you can be a tax collector and get this right. Whatever you do, working as though you are working for the Lord. Jesus tells the parable of the talents, and he talks about the master who goes away, and he leaves, in the parable, it's about money. He leaves it with the servants, right? And he tells the servants, I'm going away, take care of these resources, this gift that I have given you, take care of it. Whatever you do, work at it as though you are working for the Lord, as though it is your goal, your hope, your drive, your dream, your legacy, that one day the master will say to you, well done. Well done, good and faithful servant, because you understood the assignment. You understood that the assignment was to first of all love God, to allow God to fill you up, then that love overflows from you into the world around you. That's what it comes down to. Loving to the best of the ability that you're able to do, that's what it comes down to. You used the gifts, the resources, the tools that you had, and you loved the world around you well. This weekend, we celebrate, tomorrow specifically, we celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. King was one of those kind of rare people. He was rare for a lot of ways. But specifically, he was one of those rare people who was called to a very specific time, a very specific place, for a very specific purpose. His was not a generic love God and love others. His was a generic very specific, point out injustice. Do something about these things that are happening in our world. What Martin Luther King understood was that when he looked at anyone, any human being, he looked at them and he saw that human being had received God's Spirit. And he looked around and he saw that people were being treated as though they were not made in God's image, as though they were not on the same level playing field at the foot of the cross that all of us are. And he looked around and he saw this injustice, and it was unacceptable to him, and he got to work, because that's what he was called to do. I have a video that I want to show you. It's not the traditional kind of Martin Luther King video that you might expect to see. What I'm going to show you is actually a YouTube personality. His name is Kid President. This video is about 9 years old, but he talks about Dr. King. And because he's a kid, he talks about it as though he's talking to kids, which I think is super helpful and clear sometimes. So I want to share this with you. Take a look.
Once upon a time, there's a man named Martin Luther King Jr. It's funny to think about because now we know his name so well, but at one time he was just a kid. Like maybe you're a kid watching this. Well, he was a kid too. Well, maybe you're a grown-up. That's okay too. Former kids are welcome here. I don't discriminate. Martin Luther King grew up to be a great man, of course, but things weren't all that great in the world while he was growing up. Not everybody was treated like they were somebody, and I believe that you should treat everybody like it's their birthday. But they didn't do that. People looked at the color of their skin, and that's how they decided if they were friends or not. Not cool, man. That didn't make him feel good. That didn't make anybody feel good. But his parents helped him grow up. He went to church. He learned about love. He grew up to be a minister to help a lot of people. He did all sorts of cool stuff. He helped a lot of people learn about love too. But still, he looked around and said, things should be better. He wanted to change things, so he did stuff. He decided, instead of spreading the hate, he would spread the love. He wanted to bring people together. Where people were hurting, he stepped in to help. He marched with them. He walked with them. He walked arm in arm with everyone. Sometimes it didn't go well, but he kept going. Sometimes he ended up in prison, but he kept going. Some people didn't like him, but he kept going. Some days were hard, but he kept going. Love does that, it just keeps going, even when things are dark. And, well, I don't like this part of the story, but things did get pretty dark. Someone who didn't agree with him shot him. He died in April 1968. Now, kid President, why are you telling us this sad story? Come on. I know. Look, I'm sorry, but it happened. I don't like that happened. Now, I gotta tell you something. When things aren't awesome, it can be tough. And things will always be awesome, but your response can be. Martin Luther King's response? It was awesome. Today, I just wanted us to think about this. Isn't it cool that we can change things? Like any of us, anybody. He dreamed and he changed things. And he dreamed and he kept sharing his dreams. They became not just his dream, a lot of people's dream. Like this one. I have a dream that little black boys and black girls will join hands with white boys and white girls and become sisters and brothers. That's a pretty good dream. Let's dream like that. That could change things.
I don't know, there we go. Kid President had some cute little quotes there throughout his message there. The one that I have on the screen, referring to Dr. King, he said he wanted to change things, so he did stuff, which I think just really cuts to the core of it, doesn't it? Now, I know that we've talked about how who we are is so much more important than what we do, but what we've also talked about is that what we do then flows out of who we are. Those two things aren't actually able to be separated all that well. Notice he says Dr. King wanted to change things, so he did stuff. What he doesn't say is Dr. King wanted to change things, so he sat around and talked about it. Dr. King wanted to change things, so he complained about it. Dr. King wanted to change things, so he pointed at somebody else and said, this is your problem, you fix it. Dr. King wanted to change things, so he did stuff. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says, blessed are those who work for peace, the peacemakers, which is so much different than peacekeepers. Because what peacekeepers do is peacekeepers go along to get along, right? They take the position, they see that a position is neither safe nor popular, and they decide, I don't want to rock the boat, I'm not going to do that. That's a peacekeeper. A peacemaker is very different. A peacemaker is someone who sees when people are being treated unfairly. A peacemaker sees when things in the world are not as they should be. How do they know what those things are? Because they're filled with God's love. Because that human-sized portion of God's Spirit that is within them reminds them of what true love actually looks like. Not what our world might tell us it is, not shouting from the rooftops what we think it is, not starting arguments with people, but what true love, that isn't love. What true love actually is. That's the difference. That's how you know when you are in this place of being a peacemaker versus just stirring the pot for the sake of stirring the pot. Love does things. He wanted to do things. He wanted to change stuff, so he did. I got that wrong. He wanted to do things, so wanted to change things, so he did stuff. Wanted to change things, so he did stuff. That's what he said, right? Blessed are the peacemakers, those who long for peace. They will be satisfied. The next thing that Kid President said that I wanted to kind of point out to you for a second, love just keeps going, even when things are dark. It's like 1 Corinthians tells us, love never loses hope. Love just keeps going even when things are dark. I want to tell you something about this young man who is here on the screen. His real name is Robbie, and these videos were made about 9 or 10 years ago when he was 9 or 10, older than that. They happened longer than that because he's in his early 20s now. But when this kid talks about how love just keeps going even when things are dark, he actually knows a lot about what he's talking about. He has a bone condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, which is known as brittle bone disease. So by the time this kid was 10 years old, making this video, he had had over 70 broken bones. There was barely a time in this kid's life when he didn't have some kind of a cast on him because just being a normal kid would cause a bone to break. And he had older siblings. And so one of his older brothers-in-law then started making these Kid President videos with him because he was so inspired by Robbie and how Robbie never let the darkness win. How no matter what he was dealing with, Robbie always sought out how could he be an encouragement? How could he shine light into the darkness? How could he spread goodness even when there was so much darkness in his own life and so much heartache and disappointment? But he was always focused on how he could do something good, how he could share that. Now this young man is training to be a physical therapist. I imagine that as he has grown up, he has spent more time around physical therapists than anybody else in the entire world. And he has come to understand that he can love those around him. he can shine a light, specifically then through this career that he's being called to do, that he can receive the love that God has given him, that he can receive the blessings that God has given him, even in the midst of his struggle with this brittle bone disease, and he can still then be a light to others. Dr. King said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Only love is ever going to be able to take care of the problems that we can look around at the world and we can see that are happening all around us. Only love is ever going to be able to do that. And when you choose to be a part of that, when you choose to step into your life's meaning, to your life's purpose, to love God and allow God to shower you with his love and then to share that love with the world around you, I am not saying that everything in your life is going to be smooth sailing. Right? I think we instinctively understand that. It doesn't mean that God is going to solve all of your problems and everything is going to work out from here on out. We can't say that when we look at Dr. King. We can't say that when we look at Robbie. We can't say that when we look at our own lives. But I can absolutely tell you this. When you decide that you are going to take the things that you are good at, the things you care about, and you are going to step into your purpose, to allow God to fill you with his love, and you be in this loving relationship with him, and then that love overflow from you into the world around you, what I can promise you, number one, you will not be bored. 100%, you will not be bored, okay? And I can also promise you that even though other people may not recognize what you're doing, even though other people may not give you the things that you think that you have needed up until that point to feel satisfied in the work that you're doing, I promise you, God will meet you exactly where you are. And God will give you exactly what you need to do the things that God has called you to do well, to do the things that you are filled with his love, to share to the world around you. God will meet you there, and he will provide for you in ways that you maybe never even imagined he possibly could, because not only are you obeying, but you're living in alignment with your owner's manual. You are living in the way that your owner's manual says you will function best, by loving God, allowing him to love you, and by loving people. As you think about this, and I imagine that as some of you leave here today, you are going to think about this question a little bit. What are the tools? What are the things that God has given me? And how is God calling me to use those specifically to love him and to love others? I want you to understand that every single word in this book is going to point you to where you need to go. Your meaning, your purpose, whatever it is that God wants to do in you and through you is going to be found right here. The one who created you, the one who breathed his breath of life into you, the one who was crucified for you because he would rather do that than be separated from you. He wants to meet you exactly where you are. He wants to give you exactly what you need to love well. The world does not like it when we love well. I want to just be honest about that. We walk in this sinful atmosphere, right? This sinful milieu that's just kind of all around us. The world doesn't appreciate it when people love well. We know that because the world didn't appreciate it when Jesus loved well. If people knew how to love well, if that's what the world wanted, people like Dr. King wouldn't be needed. But I think we all know that Dr. King was very much needed, and voices like Dr. King's continue to be needed today because the world doesn't love it when we love well. So when you do this, understand, people are going to reject you for that. They rejected Jesus for it. People are going to misunderstand you. They misunderstood Jesus. People might resent you. They might even hate you for it. They resented and they hated Jesus for loving well. But God will meet you where you are, and God will give you what you need. And despite all of those things, you may find that you are functioning better than you ever have because you are functioning in alignment with your owner's manual. Love God, love the world that God created. So my encouragement for you this week is to think about what those things are for you. The big, the small ways that God might be calling you to love, the extending of an olive branch, the making of a phone call, the reaching out to someone who just drives you up the wall. I don't know who you're thinking about, but you do. Extending that love to them. And you're not going to do this perfectly. You're going to make mistakes. But the really good thing that God promises, number one, God promises to multiply. You see it all throughout the Gospels. The tiniest act of love gets multiplied. And the other thing that we know is your mistakes, those aren't going to last forever because the only things that last forever are faith, hope, and love. Those are the things that last forever. Those are the things that we are called to receive from God. You were made by love. You were made for love. You were made to share that love. It's just love. Okay? Love. How about that? Amen. Let's stand and we'll sing.